Up front there and the other, and you guys know what that's like.
So, yeah.
My name is Mike Bamberg. I'm one of the flight instructors at the club. I also work for the company here, Hillsborough Aviation, and I usually am the liaison between the activities that we do as a glider club and the activities that the flight school does. So I have a lot of the responsibility to try to carry the messages back and forth between the two different groups. Today I'm going to talk about airspace awareness. You know, we have an incredibly wonderful field. It's right next to a highway, brings a lot of business in for our intros, makes money so we all can buy new equipment. But we're also in an extremely challenging airspace, and we need to be aware of what it is. So we're going to go over these things. First thing we're going to talk about here is national airspace. What is Class Golf airspace? Anyone but Tobenmeyer? Anyone? Class Golf airspace. Okay, Ali.
It's the leftovers.
It's the leftovers. That's an excellent way to put it. The other thing about Class Golf is it always touches the ground. There's no Class Golf that is separated from the ground. Now, sometimes people think that since we have an airport that is not a airport next to or part of a controlled airport, that we are in Class Golf. We are not. We are actually in Class Echo. Echo is what the FAA calls controlled airspace. Question is, who controls it? No? Pilots. Thank you. That's the right answer. This Class Echo airspace is primarily controlled by pilots, and that pilot control is nothing more than personal discipline. There's no one else you have to talk to. It's personal discipline.
Even when you're on the ILS?
Even when you're on the ILS. Because it's Class Echo.
Right.
We'll talk about that for just a moment.
Okay.
The discipline amounts to this, so far as glider pilots are concerned. We have cloud clearances and we have visibility requirements. Cloud clearances, we must be 500 feet below the clouds, 1,000 feet above the clouds, 2,000 feet beside the clouds, and we need to have flight visibility of 3 miles or greater. Now, I will be the first one to admit to you that I know that there are times when we are operating at our glider port when we don't meet those requirements. Not possible to meet those requirements when we take off. I've seen people take off. Not me personally, fortunately. Not this time around, anyway. Stay out of the clouds. And you're going to see why here in just a moment. Why it's so critical for us. Everybody, but particularly for us, to stay out of the clouds. Okay, so here we have this nice red circle. And if I hadn't covered it up with the red circle, what you would have seen would be a blue dashed line like this line around Troutdale. And that's Class Delta airspace. Class Delta airspace is airspace that is served by a tower. If the tower is only part-time, when the tower is closed, it's no longer Class Delta. It's usually Class Echo. In addition, we have this little blue box. And I want you to look at what's right in the middle of that blue box. If you don't know how to read a sectional, I'll tell you. That's glider port. Right in the middle of that blue box. And that blue box, if we didn't have the blue box blocking it, would be a magenta series of dashed lines representing a Class Echo airspace to the surface. So normally, if I was out here, Class Echo airspace would start at 700 feet. And if I was out here, Class Echo airspace would start at 1,200 feet. But where we are, it starts at the surface. So we have to follow Class Echo rules at all times. Now, our wonderful little airport is right on the edge of Hillsborough Airport, and there are 4 instrument approaches, and Venessa reminded me actually 3 departure procedures, all of which come very close to our airspace. I'm going to show you specific lines that show you how close they get to our airspace. I'm moving faster this time, Venessa, so I can leave you more time. Now, you don't really need to know what those spaces are, but you do need to know where they go. This red line, right here is the center line of Hillsborough Airport. This red line goes out into space, all the way out almost to Vernonia. It's a long ways away. And here's our airport, right here. Now, if an airplane is following the instrument approach and following the procedure exactly, then they should be above 1,700 feet on any one of the three standard approaches, above 1,700 feet here when they cross by our airport. However, as we go out further, the line gets higher. When you hear people talking about crossing over, we have in our databases, if any of you know about the waypoint databases that Steve Mason put together, we have a number of waypoints. These waypoints describe the minimum altitude at each of these places along this line. So when you get your OD or you get your whatever you're using for your flight computer and you're out there flying, make sure you understand where those points are. They are lined up on this red line and they go all the way out almost to Vernonia. But we got a very close distance here. Our tow pilots typically turn across here, come across this way, and then head on out. Hillsborough Aviation. Most of you don't have no idea what Hillsborough Aviation does. But Hillsborough Aviation on a 2-hour cycle puts out between 35 and 50 aircraft every 2 hours. They go out this direction and they come back this direction if they're power planes. And if they're helicopters, they come back this direction and come down here. So these guys are going to be climbing. Right here is, let me find that again. Okay, where are you? Skyport should be here somewhere. Can't see it from this side.
What are you looking for, Mike? What are you looking for?
Oh, here it is. Skyport.
Greenhouse?
Skyport's right here.
Ah, okay, greenhouse.
This is Skyport. And so they're crossing just south of Skyport. The nursery is right here.
Yeah,
This is the nursery. So they're climbing usually about 2,000 feet, right about here, going up to 2,500 or even 3,500. Yes, Ed?
Can you just sketch out the 5-mile limit that comes out of
We
Hillsborough?
will in a moment.
Thank you.
The helicopters are going to be coming in at 1,000 to 800 feet AGL. They're going to cross underneath this line. They're going to be just where Glencoe reaches Highway 26. Then they're going to follow that line down and proceed south into the Charlie helicopter pattern. So this is the main traffic flow from the flight school, and the red line again represents the approach into or missed approach out of Hillsborough. Yes, sir.
A half-scale deflection for the ILS as it passes over.
Half-scale deflection for an ILS at that distance is going to be about 400 feet, so they are going to be really close. The other thing is, how many of you have ever flown an NDB approach? NDBs are notoriously non-precision. And, you know, I have watched students fly an NDB approach to Hillsborough. Now, our NDB station is right here. And so they actually have a pretty good signal when they cross our airport. But by the time you get to Hillsborough, it's not unusual that someone who thinks they've flown it perfectly, and I've watched them fly it, they'll be here or they'll be here. I mean, they can be quite a ways off that line and still be technically exactly on the course. It's really amazing how that happens. Sir?
The helicopters, are they usually at or below 700?
They're, in the pattern, they're at or below 700. On the coming in, they're usually 800 to 1,000. Okay, so here's that black line. This black line represents the line we were looking at before. It runs right out. Here's our wonderful little glider port here. We have the instrument departure called the SCAPO instrument departure. It goes to an intersection right here on this blue line. We come out just about the North Plains, turn right, and proceed out along this line. So they're climbing here. When they make this turn, they might be at 1,800 feet. And when they continue up over the top of Pumpkin Ridge, they may only be at 2,500 to 3,000 feet. If you're over Pumpkin Ridge, you might say to yourself, oh, I'm doing great. I'm out of the way. Nope, not exactly. So this is the common departure. This rounding circle indicates the what's called the Chisholm or the Burney departure. The Burney departure goes more southerly. The Chisholm departure turns like this. These are GPS, high precision, autopilot flown departures. They're going to end up in exactly the same place almost every time. And they are usually turning right over the top of Olinger or very close to it, where they're going to end up. Here's that class Delta airspace again. Now, this gold square represents the area that we as glider pilots typically do our training work. Not our cross country, but our training. Goes down as far south as just south of Skyport. Goes up north here. This would be the, you can just see the tower right there for the cell tower. This is the east edge of Banks, and right here is the glider port. We don't normally go further east than the glider port. But look at that red box. That's the Hillsborough Aviation practice area. That actually doesn't belong to Hillsborough Aviation. It's just how we designate where we're going to put those 40 aircraft every 2 hours. And it extends from Apple Valley all the way down to McMinnville, and from the eastern edge of Forest Grove to the just beyond, just think of it, just beyond Hag Lake, along that line. They don't normally go much further than the edge of the mountains here, but occasionally we're over Hag Lake. So on this sectional we have a little box. The little box says, caution, intensive flight training in this area. Contact traffic on 122.75. So here's a number you need to remember. Now, this is not a special frequency for anyone in particular. It's an FAA designated frequency for air-to-air conversations. So we will oftentimes hear people at great distances away having conversations on this frequency. When the experimental pilots are testing out their airplane and they have a buddy that's flying formation on them, watching the airplane while they run it through its paces, you'll hear them talking. They might be up in Arlington. I hear them all the time. Okay, so they're going to be talking there. This is where we're going to be for the most part. If we're going to be out on a cross country, we're going to be out in this area here, typically, or along this edge here. Cross country guys don't normally operate in this area for a number of reasons, not the least of which is there's no lift there. But we need to be aware of those frequencies. Now, I get to give a presentation very similar to this to the Hillsborough Aviation instructors, both the helicopter instructors and the fixed wing instructors, and we let them know that we have frequencies, and I let them know what they are. Do you have a question?
Yeah, what part do you say we don't typically operate in?
Well, we don't typically operate in the valleys here because there's not much lift in the valleys.
South of Hat Lake.
Yeah, well, south of Hag Lake, yeah, but
Okay.
the point is that they don't go where we are when we're doing cross country for the most part. Okay, we have some alternate airports in the area. We have Sunset, we have Skyport. Here's your yellow line for where the Class Delta airspace is. It goes out to, this is Glencoe. It goes out to Beach Road, right about here is the edge of it.
Where's the nursery?
The nursery is right here, and Skyport's right there. So if you can't make it back to Hillsborough, there's two choices for places that you may be able to get a tow and get out.
Where's the glider port?
Say again?
Where's the glider port?
I'm sorry, the glider port's right here. I was reminded in the last meeting that the owner of the Skyport, even though it's a public access airport, is delighted if we are willing to pay $5 for the opportunity to be towed out. And that's probably a good thing for the Good Neighbor program. Last thing I want to cover is landing to the east. You look at this blue line. Blue line represents the general pattern that people fly when they're flying approach to land. I want you to notice these two blue lines. Those two blue lines are the runway ends. How many people knew that this was the runway end? Yeah, you had another talk a few minutes ago because I saw it, right? Okay, so this is the runway end. Now when we're teaching people to land, what we want them to be at is 10 to 20 feet over the threshold at the approach speed and touching down within the first third and stopping about halfway down the runway. Which means when you're back here in this area, you might be 200 or 300 feet high. Okay? That means you ought to be 200 or 300 feet high right here. Too many times what we see when people are landing to the east, is they come across here, drop down to ground level, and come cruising through this area at 5 to 10 feet high. Don't need to do that, folks. We want you making your approach to the end of the runway, not the end of the field.
Is that normally marked off?
It is marked off. We have cones there. And in fact, that's the double cone. If you go out, that's when we set up as the double cone. That's the end of the runway.
Is that where the cart lives typically, at that juncture?
What do you mean?
No,
Just
further back. Tow rope away.
It's west of there.
No.
It's west of there. Okay.
Yeah,
Somewhere
so-
the cart lives.
So I don't know what you mean by where the cart lives. Here's the field.
The launch cart is right on that
The
little
wing runner
launch line.
station.
Here's our shed, which by the way, we don't have a tall tree there anymore.
Right.
It's usually right abeam the shed.
Oh, okay.
There's cones there, that's the stop line, so that would be the start line landing the other direction.
Yeah, so coming this way, you shouldn't touch down prior to this. In fact, nothing wrong with touching down quite a bit further down the runway.
Except you'd be on the other runway, right?
Why would you be on the other runway?
Well, depending on the day, we just went through the
Right.
the wind.
But either way, that's a displaced threshold.
Either way, it's a displaced threshold. It doesn't matter which direction you're going. Okay, just from a standpoint here, you think about it, you say, oh gosh, I really want to be over here. No, you don't want to be over there, especially if we reverse the field, why did we do it?
When.
Wind. So actually, many of us barely clear the edge here, turn and then bring a steep approach and plan to touch down in this area and roll out to here. Not a problem. We're going to get a cart. We're going to come and get you. All right, any questions? I'm going to turn the time over to Vanessa.
Good morning. I don't know if there's a lot of new faces out here. I'm Venessa Edwards. I'm one of the new instructors, new tow pilot. I also happen to work in the control tower here at Hillsborough, so radio communications is kind of what I do. Ian McFall, are you here somewhere? He's one of our new instructors too, so he's more than happy to take some students and help everybody out here, so I just wanted to introduce him as well. Radio communication, as you can see here, what to say, how to avoid embarrassing yourself. That being said, it's okay if you do. I do it all the time. 5 simple steps, if you will, to talking on the radio. Who you're calling, who you are, where you are, what do you want to do, what do you know. It's almost kind of like a first date. Sorry. Next. Who are you calling? The most common one that we are going to use is traffic. This is the common traffic advisory frequency. North Plains traffic, Skyport traffic, whatever traffic. Tower, if you're talking to a control tower, Hillsborough Tower. If you happen to make it out over to Salem or Troutdale, same thing, Salem Tower, Troutdale Tower, Portland Tower if you're really adventuresome. The ground controller is known as ground. If you happen to actually land here and they actually, for some odd reason, switch you to ground, I cannot imagine why, that's how you would say it. If you're talking to a flight service station, they go by radio. So McMinnville Radio, Seattle Radio. If you happen to be on 122.0, which is another flight service function called Flight Watch, that's for weather information, you address them as Flight Watch. The Air Route Traffic Control Center, Seattle Center, Oakland Center if you're way the heck down there, etc. Any terminal radar approach control facility would be Portland Approach. If you're down by Eugene, Cascade Approach. That's how they're all addressed. Who you are. You start yourself out with glider. If you're communicating with ATC, please just say glider. I am the only controller I know of that flies gliders. Most people don't know the difference between a Grobe, a Blannick, and a Schweitzer, and if you say that, they're gonna be like, huh? So glider 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or November 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I would highly encourage all of you to say glider, because that matters for altitude purposes. You're letting the controller know that you cannot stay level. You have to be descending. If you're talking amongst the tow plane or amongst your fellow glider pilots, contest ID works perfectly well as well. Where are you? The two big things with that is you're over a well-known location. Greenhouses, the Y, the IP, the whatever that we use on a regular basis, or if you're not over any sort of significant landmark, I am number of miles cardinal direction from a known point. I am 4 miles southwest of North Plains is a perfectly acceptable one. Next. What are you gonna do? I'm over the IP. Okay, that's nice. Now what? So I'm over the IP, I'm entering left downwind, landing 27 left. I'm at such and such altitude, that might be appropriate, there might be someone below you, there might be someone above you. If you're gonna be doing any sort of special maneuver, you're gonna make a short approach, you are going to do a no spoiler landing, this is gonna be good information because your pattern is gonna be flown different. Tow planes, I don't know if we have any tow pilots in here. If you're having to make spacing maneuvers because you're giving way to a glider, that's good as well. I'm making a left 360 for spacing, or I'm going to hold over this point until such and such comes in. This is all very important information. Everybody needs to be on the same page, and that's the key to success. What do you know? If you happen to be going into a controlled airport, or you're going to transition the Delta airspace at Hillsborough because you got a little too low over Twin Oaks or something and you need to just make a direct line back to North Plains, you might have to talk to me, sorry. If you're able to listen to the automated terminal information service broadcast that gives weather, runway in use, appropriate NOTAMs, etc., and this saves me from having to talk to you a whole lot. It'll be A through Z, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, etc., know your phonetic alphabet. If you're coming back into North Plains and you know you're following someone, say that. I have traffic ahead in sight, following, and that lets the guy in front of you know that, oh, good, they're not gonna run me over. Status of ground activities, anything that might be happening on the ground that you happen to notice, broadcast that, that's important, you know. I have the glider on the runway inside, I'll step over to 27 right if need be, something like that. Just keeping everybody in the loop and painting a clear picture is really important. Next. The key to radio communication is doing it. A lot of people that don't do it a lot tend to just not do it ever because it's like, oh, I don't want to sound like that guy on the radio. I'm just going to go around and maybe I'll make it back to North Plains. Pish posh. I don't care what dumb thing you think you can say on the radio. I've heard worse, I promise you. Hi, we are at Hillsborough and there's lots of people that don't even speak English natively that fly here. A good way to do this is practice. When you're driving to the airport, give a radio call. Thinking about it is a lot different than actually speaking it. Believe it or not, it's two different parts of your brain that kind of execute these. And I don't know how many times I've had people flying into Hillsborough and they key that mic and they just go silent on me. It happens all the time. So get a clear idea in your head of what you're going to say and then key the mic. This is really important. A good way also is to listen to air traffic control frequencies and just listen and familiarize yourself with the lingo. They make this wonderful website called liveatc.net, and you can get virtually any frequency in the whole entire United States. Yeah, even Hillsborough, it's on there. You listen to it, it's good fun. Because we say all sorts of interesting things on the radio sometimes. Next. Radio etiquette, stay off the mic until you know it is your turn to speak. I don't know how many times I hear people key the mic and all I hear is, "Ree!" It's really loud. That being said, if you happen to hear that, please don't get on the radio and say, "blocked." Jets love to do it. It's annoying. It solves nothing. Using standard phraseology, so not saying, hey, I'm Bob, I'm gonna be over the IP and I'm gonna be landing somewhere. No. I am November 12345 over the IP 1500, entering left down when landing 27 left. That is standard, everybody understands that. Read the pilot controller glossary, lots of standard phrases in there. The Airman's Information Manual, the AIM, has a lot of information on kind of standard phraseology for operating on the radio. Not really sure what that is. In the case of emergencies, if you have an urgent situation or an emergency, most people just revert to Mayday. I've never heard pan before. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. That is the first thing out of your mouth, then the rest of it, because that gets everybody attention. Oop, I need to stay off the radio and let this guy solve this problem. Next. Good, bad, and the ugly. Ugly, stammering, unclear, not standard, keying the mic, turning brain off, things like that. Bad, more transmission than is necessary. A number of years ago when I was working in Sacramento, had a gentleman call up for a departure. I'm Cessna, yada yada, and I'm ready to depart 20, and we're gonna do a flight follow, and we're headed to this airport, and we're gonna go see the Air Museum, and we'll be back in a couple hours. Oh good God, and I was busy, so this was tying up the radio. I had stuff to do, and I found that just tiny little moment to say, sir, the only thing you didn't tell me is what you're gonna have for lunch. To which he replied, I think we're gonna have the room. Clearly he does not understand sarcasm. The good on this is complete, concise, and correct. Clear, to the point, short and sweet. I'm here, I'm me, I'm gonna do this, and this is how it's gonna go, and we're off the radio, on to the next guy. So that's the correct way to do it. Next. Local frequencies to know. The North Plains Common Traffic Advisory frequency is 123.3. Just a word on that, it is not published on the sectional because we are a private airport. Most fixed wing pilots, or non-glider pilots I should say, do not know that 123.3 is a designated glider frequency. It's not common knowledge. That being said, some pilots who are unfamiliar with the area might make the assumption that we are on 122.9. Does anybody know the significance of that frequency? It is the designated multi-com frequency for uncontrolled airports. An uncontrolled airport that does not have a designated CTAF frequency will revert to this. And a lot of pilots might make that assumption about North Plains. The West Practice Area CTAF, which Mike spoke about a little bit, 122.75. If you're in that area for some reason, I would encourage you to get on there. Hillsborough Aviation is not the only one that uses that area. Twin Oaks goes out there to practice. People from Chehalem, McMinnville, Aurora, folks will sometimes wander over there. If you ever have the chance to look at the radar screen, if you come visit me in the tower on a busy day, it is a very target-rich environment, I'll put it that way. Tons of people out there, it's very busy. The Hillsborough Airport, the two frequencies that would concern you is the ATIS, 127.65 if you want to get the weather broadcast. And the tower frequency is 119.3. You might find yourself a little low when you know there's a nice little thermal right inside that airspace. Call us. We can issue traffic. You're required to. It's the Delta airspace. The Portland approach frequencies near our area are 126.0 and 118.1. That'll flip-flop back and forth what the controller is using depending on what sectors they have combined up, etc. This is good information to see what kind of IFR traffic might be coming down the ILS. Thank you. Just a quick word on radar coverage in the area. We have two radar antennas in the area that provide some sort of coverage at North Plains. The Falls City Long Range Radar sees down to about 500 feet AGL at North Plains, so it gets down pretty low considering how far away it is. It does not see primary only targets. And what the primary target is it sends out a radio, it reflects off of something, and it bounces back. That long range radar does not do that. If you do not have a transponder, it does not see you. The Portland ASR, which is an approach radar, only sees down to about 2,500 feet AGL at North Plains. The West Hills block that signal a lot, so it doesn't see down very low. That being said, if you're above that altitude, it will pick up primary only targets, so it just reflects off of whatever it sees, bounces it back, and I see a nice little blue dot on the radar. Gliders don't typically show up though. You guys are small, and you're at relatively low speed, and because you're thermaling, it thinks it has almost no ground speed. And when it sees that, it's like, ground clutter, and it filters it out. Transponders solve this problem wonderfully. If the controller sees a target out there and they were working a jet or an aircraft into Hillsborough, they can call that traffic. If you are squawking 1202, the controller knows you are a glider. That is a designated beacon code for gliders. Also, not having a transponder, when the jets are coming in who have what's called TCAS, if you don't have a transponder, that TCAS does not see you. And even out the window, I don't know how many of you sat in the cockpit of a jet or a larger aircraft, it's a tiny little window. The visibility on those things sucks. You and the glider have a nice big canopy and you can see all around you. The comparison I like to make is when you're out flying, you guys are the motorcycles and them jets are the semi-trucks. You need to be the defensive one and looking for traffic. You really do. They can't see you, but you can see them. And the easiest way to make yourself visible is turn. Get wings up, you make yourself a lot more visible that way. Any questions? Sweet. Alrighty.
Actually, I got one, I'm sorry.
Yes.
What about the, what were we just talking about, the ADS-B or something like that? Do those transmit, or do those have to be?
ADS-B is a relatively new technology. I don't know how many are familiar with it. There's ADS-B in, so you can have a receiver that takes information in on that broadcast. Or some jets now have what's called ADS-B out, and it's usually tied in with their transponder. It sends a signal out. There are a number of cell phone antennas that the FAA has sort of piggybacked on that pick up these ADS-B signals. That being said, I know here at Hillsborough, I think the only folks that really have the ADS-B out transmitters are the Nike jets. No one else has them yet because they're expensive.
Is there a power limitation? Does that take a lot of power to run the ADS-B out?
Oh, I imagine, more than a glider
Yeah.
has.
They're pretty new, which means they're not necessarily making them with gliders in mind yet because most of the airplanes don't even have them yet. They're fairly common in Europe because it's a little more used there. We're starting to phase in the technology. Come the year 2020, it's going to be mandatory to have ADS-B out if you're in a Charlie Bravo or above 10,000. So it kind of follows the Mode C rules that are in place right now. Gliders are probably going to be exempted from that because, again, it sucks up a lot of juice, kind of like the older transponders do.
Is there going to be just a blanket exemption for anything that does not have an engine-driven electrical system?
I don't know. I don't think they've made that
We don't know
determination
where
yet.
that's going to be going.
Yeah, I mean, that's 6 years down the road, and well, in FAA land, that's probably actually 10 years down the road, so there you go. Any other questions on
Yeah.
stuff?
Is there a radar here at Hillsborough though?
No, there is no
Okay.
radar antenna here.
Okay.
The closest one is Portland, because the terrain blocks it. We don't use it. We use the Falls City Center radar,
And
which
that's
is
why they
way
cut
west
you
of
off
Salem.
at 2,900 feet when you're coming inbound then?
The Portland approach? Yeah. Yep,
Okay.
because once they drop radar, they can't do
Got
anything
it.
with you.
All right.
Yes?
Vanessa, how much of this Hillsborough training traffic will show up on the farm?
No, they all have transponders, so if you have FLARM sees transponders from what I understand, correct?
Right,
Yeah.
but it only sees it as a circle, it doesn't
Peak-
tell you
it gives
which
you a
direction
peak-
it is.
No,
It's
because
like
it
a
doesn't
PCAS
communicate with the transponder. It's
return.
just like, I see a target, that's cool.
That's it, yeah.
It's non-directional.
That being said, radars do not see FLARM, transponders and TCAS do not see FLARM.
No.
FLARM is good for communicating with each other, and that's about where it stops. And that's just gliders, and not even all gliders have that, so it has its limitations,
It's like walkie-talkie, it's just proprietary.
something like that. Any other questions? Excellent.
You need a slide. Oh,